Good evening. My name is Juan Vasquez Rosa, and I'll be talking this evening about empathy and the lessons that I've learned while being a student of Colorado Christian University. This will not be a lengthy video, and the idea behind it is to reflect and share my experiences thus far. They do come from a Christian worldview, and it's an attempt to put up front my own perspective and understanding of empathy at this early stage. So the first question that I am faced with is empathy actually in the Bible? And I've put two verses over here. One is 1 Peter 3:8, where Peter tells us, "Finally, all of you, be of one mind, having compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tender-hearted, and be courteous." One of the things that I learned about empathy is that it's not really based on what we think about the other person. Empathy is a state where we have an opportunity to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and be able to walk with them the walk they're walking, not allowing our judgments and not allowing our preconceived notions to take away from the actual act of empathy. Empathy is about being there for somebody else, like Peter is saying, of being of one mind, having compassion for one another, love as brothers, tender-hearted and courteous. It is an opportunity to go beyond and show somebody their worth, not because of what they've done, but because they're worth something, and they were created by God. The next verse in 1 John 3:17, it says, "But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him?" This question attempts to highlight the fact that what we have doesn't matter unless we open our heart to others. And God's presence is found in that. So, I think empathy is throughout the Bible. I think empathy is actually the way God allows us to communicate at the spiritual and emotional levels. I was given the task to find specific Bible examples of great empathy, and I found two of the biggest examples that spoke to me, and they may be subtle, or at least the first one is subtle, and the second one is really up in front of our faces, so to speak. But let's start with the first one. Right here, Jesus is being described as feeling compassion for them because he felt that they were being harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And what we can see the setting over here is that Christ, the Son of God, felt empathy for those he came to provide salvation for. He walked amongst them. He had all the power to judge them. He had all the right to cast stones, yet he declined that approach. He walked amongst them. He felt their pain. He felt their walk. That is actually the biggest message that we all receive, was the fact that God decided to become a man and walk with us. That is a message of empathy. Now we look at a more direct understandable from our perspective in reference to empathy, where we see this true event where a man died and he was being carried out. He was an only son of a mother, and she was a widow. And when Jesus saw her, he had compassion. He said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came up and touched the bearer, and the bearer stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, rise." And that man rised. So over here we have something beyond empathy, to the point where he actually moves in action and creates a miracle. But what we want to hone in is that he actually felt compassion for her. He put herself in her position. You could almost see the position that God put himself in when he gave his only son. So Christ was able to see the pain and suffering that this mother was feeling, just like God was going to feel as he would die on the cross. So I think these are specific great examples of empathy. My personal faith impacts empathy in this way. I recognize that I am a possession of Christ. And this is so important, because I accept the fact that he redeemed me, that he decided to purify me, to make it his prized possession. The trials, the tribulations that I went through, the loneliness that I've experienced, and the walk that he has showed me through his word, the empathy he has showed me regardless of the sins that I've committed, and how underserving I am of being in his presence, has taught me that he loves me. That when he came to this earth and he walked amongst us, he knows exactly the pain and suffering that I lived through my sin and my loneliness, and he doesn't judge me. To the point that he gave his life for me, and that he will return for me, as it says in 1 Thessalonians 1:13-17. I believe that he died and he rose again, and that the Father will bring me to Christ. His empathy is so that those of us who are alive and remain will be caught up together in the clouds to meet Jesus. He is so empathetic to what we go through. He's so empathetic to the sin that we've lived through, that he has decided to allow us this amazing gift of being with him eternally. Finally, I'll close with this, and this is a shift, but I think it ingrains some of the things that I've learned in respect to empathy. We have the ability to empathize through self perspectives and others' perspectives. God has armed us with our brains and has armed us with the capacity to be able to mimic others by imagining, by observing, and internalizing other people's facial expression, body postures, tones of their voice, the ways they move their eyes. And he has wired us in such a way that we can see that our left hemisphere allows for self-perspective, and the right hemisphere to see others' perspectives. And we use these to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We can also see that we have the capacity to observe and deduct others' mental states through our right hemisphere of our brain. And I've also learned that we have a latency response and a magnitude response, where we can respond to others sooner when these experiences are directed towards me instead of others. So when I have the capacity of putting myself in somebody else's shoes, I can actually empathize sooner and more promptly when I feel it's coming towards me. I can also empathize more when the magnitude of the situation that somebody else is going through is something that I feel is happening to me. Now, I'll wrap this up with this. In my Christian worldview, we have the greatest example of empathy, and that is Jesus Christ. He came to earth, and he decided to walk as a man, so he would know exactly what I'm going through, what you're going through. And he did so without judgment, to the point that he was willing to give his life in the cross, in this walk, just so we can find redemption, salvation, and restoration through his empathy. Thank you.